morning and welcome to Futures Recovery Healthcare's educational webinar series. I'm Cindy Goss and I'm a part of our newly launched Heroes Ascent program that's addressing military veterans and first responders, mental health, stress, PTSD, substance use disorder, and suicide intervention. While creating this new program, it was critical to include subject matter experts who have knowledge and experience working with military veterans and our first responders. Heroes Ascent was designed by military veterans and first responders for military veterans and first responders. They know the walk and the talk. They all walked a mile in their shoes and then some. Heroes Ascent has been designed to address the individual and unique needs of military veterans and our first responders. And one of our first and foremost goal was to offer a safe environment for our heroes while offering extraordinary medical and clinical services each of their individual needs and their family members met as well. Today we have one of our distinguished board members for Heroes Ascent, Janice McCarthy, and it's our honor and privilege to have you with us, and we're welcoming you here this morning to share not only who you are, why you do what you do, and why you support the supportive services for our first responders.
Oh, well, good morning, Cindy, and thank you for having me. I'm honored to be part of the Futures program and the trainings that you and I have done with our colleagues. A little background on myself is I am the widow of a Massachusetts State Police captain who took his life. It's been 13, 14 years now. And after that happened, I started on this mission to help our first responders and their families that suffer from these wounds of post-traumatic stress and are not getting the help that they need. It's really near and dear to my heart. And as the years have gone by, I've met so many wonderful people that are also engaged with this passion and this cause. But most importantly, when I think about the phase we're entering now with the recovery program and Futures, what I was so impressed when I toured that facility. Emotionally, it touched me because it is such a wonderful facility and so much needed for our first responders now more than ever. The stresses that they're facing on the job and that they're taking with them in their psyche for the rest of their lives and home to their families just don't go away. And some of these men and women need the services that are being provided. So I can't say enough about that program, and I can't say enough about how grateful I am to be associated with this and with this cause. It just so needed, and we need more of it.
Absolutely, 100%. Couldn't agree with you more, which is why we are here. But I remember meeting you in Albany, New York, 10, 12 years ago, and you were a speaker. And I collect speakers. I call them my dream team speakers, who are the people that I believe have the most knowledge, experience, and subject matter expert on what they can share with others. And by telling and sharing your story, helps other people, because as you know, there is this stigma attached to talking, to opening up, and by their natural breeding, officers are not self-disclosures. You know, they do the talking, they ask the questions. So sometimes when you look at your story with your family, do you feel that stigma or lack of services that may have contributed towards the end result, or do you feel that it's something that you or outside resources could have offered a difference?
That's a really good question, because as I've been involved in this arena now for the past 10 plus years, I have seen a shift in services offered for officers. In my husband's case, it was egregious. It was 2006 and PTSD wasn't talked about. It certainly wasn't acknowledged within the ranks of the department. And I just pray that the treatment that was exhibited at that time does not exist today. I've heard horror stories from other widows, but I think they're getting less and less as more services are made available. And that's why I was so struck when I did tour Futures and had a physical reaction thinking, wow, if this place was there when Paul was suffering, he might still be with us today. And unfortunately, at that time, not only were the services not as plentiful, but there were so many obstacles put in his way to get the treatment that he needed that I pray does not happen in today's culture. You know, I like to say that the dinosaurs hopefully are dying off, and the new generation of officers coming in are much more open to maintaining their emotional well-being and understand how important it is, because they've lost friends. They've lost too many friends.
Would be some of those obstacles that you talked about that would be in regards to your case?
Oh, okay. The biggest obstacle was Paul was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress subsequent to 3 line of duty accidents, one being run over by a bus and 2 other auto accidents on the job. And he was diagnosed with job-related post-traumatic stress and really needed a hospitalization, an in-house facility. And up here in Massachusetts at the time, there was one out in Western Mass. And we approached the department for permission to have him attend. I believe to start, it was a 2-week program. And the department gave it the okay, but attached the line item that if he did attend, he would have to retire. So in essence, they were telling him that you can go get the help that you need, sure, because it was from a line of duty injury, but you're no longer good enough to do this job, the job that he grew up wanting to do his whole life. And as you understand the police culture more than anybody, their job becomes their identity. And so if you take a cop's badge and gun away, you're taking his identity away. And Paul was a stubborn Irish cop, and he said, you're not going to put roadblocks in my way. I'm not going to go. So, you know, that was the biggest one. The other ones that were always lurking in the background were, okay, if I make an appointment with a counselor and it gets out, the guys aren't going to want to ride with me. I'm going to get relocated out into the boonies. It was there. It was all there. None of it was accepted.
I know one time when we spoke, you talked about him going for some EMDR therapy. And you shared that there were 3 pretty horrific medical, psychological injuries where he was almost killed and should have been, and through the grace of God, survived. But you talk a little bit about the EMDR and how they went through all of these different incidences. And I wanted to know if you could share the one incident that he highlighted being the most critical out of the 3 incidences that almost took his life.
Sure. That was actually one of the aha moments I had after Paul died. And I was able to go through a lot of his paperwork. And he did, at the end of his life, see a psychiatrist who was trying to help him sort through the traumas that he had endured. And EMDR, as you and I know, eye movement that tries to desensitize the trauma that the patient is experiencing. And in order to do it, you have to do it trauma by trauma. And you work the patient through it by, in essence, somewhat reliving the experience, but making them feel like that then they are in a safe place. So this psychiatrist said to him, you've experienced a lot in your career, starting with being run over by a transit bus and having your legs broken into 15 pieces, and then not being able to walk, and finally getting back to work, and then being hit by a wrong way drunk driver, and out for more surgeries, and then being dragged through a tunnel, out for more surgeries, and all of this is just spiking his PTSD. And so she said to him, let's work through the trauma. So what's the most traumatic thing that ever happened to you in your career? And he said, being told that I wasn't good enough to be a cop when they wanted me to retire. I went through all of that physical stuff, but I still had it in me to be a cop. And they were telling me, not only are you broken physically, you're broken beyond repair emotionally. So of all of those things, the most traumatic thing that happened to him was him taking his badge.
That again reinforces what you said. This is their identity. This is who they are. They put their lives on the line every day for people like us who are strangers. And sometimes they don't get recognition. Not that they're looking for recognition, because as you know, they'll say, hey, I'm just doing my job. But just recognizing them as human beings, the job that they're doing, and how can they support them as opposed to throwing them away?
I know. How can they support them? Well, first of all, by making access to these programs seamless. If it needs to be confidential, it should be confidential. But it has to be seamless. These guys have to know that they can get the help that they need and not lose their jobs. Because then what will they have?
Yeah, exactly. Because then they have nothing. And when they have nothing, then that kind of fills a void of this mental health thinking about, what am I good for? How can I support my family? How can I support my children? And I think that leads to this thought process as to, why am I even here? And I'm not sure if you started to see differences in his attitude and behavior towards the end of his life.
Oh yeah, there were marked differences, and some of it we chalked up to the post-traumatic stress becoming more deeply ingrained. And as the more you know about it, it waxes and wanes. Some people could look at him and say, oh, he's doing fine. But those of us who lived with him knew the things that he would do that were not fine. And the department knew the things that he was doing that were not fine. If there could be a conduit between the two, and I know in a perfect world, but you need all the puzzle pieces to try to figure it out. And so one of the things that I really think is important in trying to help these officers is training their peers to look out for signs that things aren't okay with Steve. It's their responsibility. Well, first of all, it's the administrator's responsibility, but the training is so important. If you don't talk about it, if you don't train these officers about how to stay mentally well themselves, but also how to save their brothers and sisters, because they will listen to them. So
how about offering services to the family members?
Exactly. So they can understand too. If someone had approached me from the department back when Paul was suffering, I often kind of liken it to be in the eye of a hurricane, in the eye of a storm. You have to remember, married couple, 3 young kids, and I knew that he was suffering, but I did not know to the extent that he was suffering. And when I did find out after he died, when I read all of the documentation of what had happened at work and how they were concerned about him, but nobody ever reached out to me. And, there's the puzzle pieces fitting together. And had, his supervisor called me and said, you know what, Jan, we're worried about Paul. We found him sitting at his desk, catatonic, and, we're worried about him. We know he went through some stuff. Treat them like human beings. It's as simple as that.
And also the impact, you talked about your 3 young children. What happens to our children who also suffer from PTSD as a result of their parents' job and the incidences? They watch the news, they see Facebook, their friends in school talk about, this person's daddy did this mommy was a part of this. What happens to our children?
Well, they become hypervigilant, and they suffer from it as well. I know that even to this day, my youngest, if I'm out somewhere and I'm not home at the time I should be home, I get a phone call. Not many teenage kids or young 20-year-olds do that, but he's already suffered a loss that was unimaginable. And as you know, that's what trauma does. It rocks your world. Something happened to you that you never would have expected. So now anything could happen. And your mind goes to that sad place.
And I think that is one of the things that you have done as a result of taking this trauma and putting into a positive manner and developing the foundation that you have. Could you share your foundation, please?
Sure. Yeah, we have a nonprofit that started based upon trainings, which is my first love, and training with the Dream Team. I just feel so energized and validated when I speak to officers because I can see it in their eyes that they get it. So the organization is called Care of Police Suicide Survivors, or the acronym COPSS. In the days of COVID, where there has not been a whole lot of training, well, even a couple of years ago, two of our missions during the year is we give out 2 scholarships to graduating seniors or college students that are survivors of law enforcement suicide. And it's been extremely humbling to me and gratifying to give these really worthy students, a lot of them who are pursuing careers in psychology, that really have been impacted, and I see my children in their essays, and so that's near and dear to my heart. So we do that every May, and every Christmas we do a Christmas gift drive for mostly newly bereaved families, but that's not always the case, because a family that has suffered a loss, usually with law enforcement, a lot of times they're the main breadwinner, and these families are not only reeling emotionally, but they're reeling financially. And, you know, I was that widow back in Christmas of 2006, looking at my 3 children, you know, 16, 14, and 8, and going, how do I put a Christmas together? Who even wants to do that? But they're still kids, and they deserve to have some joy. So there's nothing more joyful for me than at Christmas time, you know, we hook up sponsors, either monetary or through Amazon Smile. We get these kids' Christmas lists, you know, that had just lost their dad in April, or and just give them a little bit of joy. And then the other part is our trainings, which I can't wait to get back to doing.
Yes, we have some coming up for 2021. You know, Janice, I've always said about you from the time I met you, you're our angel. And yeah, and we're so pleased and honored to be a part of your organization and supporting that, as well as being a part of Futures Recovery Heroes Ascent, because you're such an asset not only to the officers but the officer family program. And we just can't thank you enough for what you do and what you sacrifice, and your children who've also sacrificed. And we thank you for this time with us, and we pray always for all of our officers to come home safe, and our first responders, and we ask God to bless them at all times. So thank you, and I so appreciate you, your efforts, your friendship. It's an honor.
Oh, same, Cindy, same. I am so grateful to be part of this program and can't wait to get back out there.
Well, in the meantime, you keep doing whatever you need to do. Ask us if we can help, and you and your family stay safe.
Thank you. Same to you.
Okay, God bless.
You too, honey. Bye-bye.